Hello, everybody, and welcome to the McRADcast. Today, Josh joins me again in the studio, aka my living room.
Boom.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, due to the COVID-19 situation and stuff, we had been recording remotely, and we had a lot of episodes kind of in the bag to release. So,
yeah, thankfully.
Yes, and we got to get caught back up because we're running out. Again.
Yeah, we are right up against the edge of it. We feel comfortable to be in person with each other now, so we're going to do that. You know, the pandemic that was we pandemic light, basically, yes. Right? And so I think it's a serious business, but also we kind of got lucky in the whole ordeal. It's not near as bad as I thought it was going to be, and that's a good thing overall. And
I think, it's probably too early to definitively say that, but... Yeah, I think that's the case.
Way.
I think
we can hope.
Sure.
Right? We can hope.
Sure. So, yeah, it's good to be back in. We got some new equipment. We're actually getting to we've been recording on it remotely, but we are finally getting to do it in person, so it's cool, and things like that. A couple of things we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get kind of serious on this episode, something we don't do very often. So... if that's off-putting, sorry about that, but I think most people are okay with that, especially with all the things going on.
Yeah, the climate of the times, that sort of thing. I also understand if you elect out of this one because you're tired of the serious nature of life now, right? Yep. I get that.
So, but we're just going to talk about, we've been talking about this a little bit lately, is one of our podcasting influences, and I guess you would say what kind of a personal heroes, Joe Rogan, who himself is kind of a divisive figure for some reason. Yeah. People love and hate him.
Absolutely.
But I think we've definitely fallen into the camp of people who definitely
I think he's a giant mentor in a lot of ways for me specifically, right? I gained a lot of information, knowledge, and perspective from a lot of his interviews that he's put on, and just his stance on life, how he conducts himself in a lot of ways. The no nonsense mostly, but also willing to listen to some nonsense openly, right? And kind of take it for what it is and judge it on the backside rather than shooting everything down from the beginning just because it isn't normal or natural or whatever it may be.
Or it's against the grain. Yeah, for sure. But he made the decision pretty recently and this is going to come out, probably the next thing we put out, I think this will be it. But,
yeah, that sounds about right.
But... he made the decision recently to go exclusively Spotify.
Yep.
And, I think at first, to a lot of people, that can seem like not a big deal, and maybe it's not. And we were just going to kind of touch on that real quick. I know that me and you had some feelings about it.
Yeah. I think my feelings are probably a little crazier than most, a little out there. Because most people, like you said, are going to be like, what's the big deal, right? Because a lot of people already have Spotify accounts. It's not a big deal just to start downloading them that way. And because he wasn't available on Spotify to begin with, right? It was like one of the only platforms he wasn't available on.
Right.
Because, he didn't think it was a fair platform, which is weird, right? Because he thought, they weren't paying enough money for the content that they were getting and giving away for free effectively, but getting ads back.
Oh, right? to artists and things?
Yeah, to the artist. He didn't think it was a fair representation of money to the artist.
Sure. Right? And I can't speak for any artist, obviously, but I do know people who make music and have music on Spotify, and I have heard kind of the trials and tribulations of what that entails.
Streaming in general.
Yeah, and just how hard it is to make money under that umbrella.
Tough. Absolutely.
But how that's also the state of music and entertainment. So
it's also a benefit because anyone can go find your music very easily, right? And so it could lead to revenue in other ways, hopefully, right? We would hope that not everybody only streams. If you have an artist that is, it doesn't matter how big or little they are. Sure. If you enjoy their thing, probably go buy it sometimes.
And I can say for my personally that if I hear something that I truly enjoy, I go buy that person's album.
You download it on your phone or whatever you want to do. It's so easy to access. You don't even have to go to the store anymore. You just spend $8 or $9 or $10 on your phone immediately, and you can support that artist. You don't even have to remember to go out and buy the CD later or the whatever it might be.
Sure.
So that is what will save the music industry eventually, is if people get on board with that program.
Right. And I know a lot of musicians too, to touch on back on the kind of pandemic thing that's happened, is it's been tough for them to make money because a lot of them do make money playing live gigs.
Yeah, that's how they make most of their money, and tips during those live gigs, right? And not only the fee that they get, the small fee they get paid by the bar, wherever it might be, the venues, but then the tips that come in, especially in the small venues. That's a big deal.
So. And I think some of them are getting back into that now, and some places are opening back up. So
and some of them had little online things where you could tip and donate to them, and not, that hopefully that helped them.
Which was a fantastic gesture, and it helped a lot of people, I'm sure. But it can't be a substitute for the real thing,
right? Yeah, we got to get back to as close to life as normal as we can to kind of get these people rolling and their livelihoods back in place and that sort of thing. But also, if you're old and compromised, stay the fuck home.
Yeah,
right,
for sure. Yeah, man, it's a lot of crazy stuff going on. But I think at the end of the day, Joe Rogan going exclusive to Spotify, there's pros and cons for sure.
Yeah.
I think most people have access to Spotify, and I think a large chunk of people already pay for the premium of Spotify. Yeah. Now, that's not to justify, you should go out and pay for it just because Joe Rogan's going there. It's just to say that I don't think it was some super obscure thing that was inaccessible to most people.
No.
Because you can still.
But it is also a giant deal that he did it.
Yes.
Right.
My biggest gripe, real quick, because I know you've got several more than me, but my biggest gripe is I pay for Spotify Premium already, but people that don't, if you're not familiar with podcasts, you probably don't listen to Rogan anyway. But if you are, you at least know who he is, at the very least. But you inside of podcast, because the way it was set up, they already do their own ads.
Yes.
Right. We don't, because we don't have sponsors, and we're such a small thing. But any semi-big to large podcast already does their own ad spots.
Yeah, and they'll just put them in the podcast themselves.
Right, and they just do the reads themselves.
Yes.
It's not a pre-recorded thing. So my issue is, now you're going to have to listen to that
plus more ads.
Spotify's ads if you don't pay for the premium.
That's correct.
So yeah, it's something you got to figure out, and it's not super expensive, but that's not to say that some people can't shell out an additional $10. It just can't happen for some people. So.
Well, yeah, and it might suck that you have ads, but it still is free at the end of the day, right? My big concern is not just the ads, but how many ads do you hear, right? Mm-hmm. It's the number of ads. I heard that it was one every 10 minutes for a podcast. So, for a 3-hour podcast, you're listening to 18 fucking ads. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is you're not listening to 18. You're listening to 18 that are only 3 ads 7 times a piece, almost 6 times a piece. Right. It's because if you've ever listened to the streaming services without the subscription, it's 4 ads. That's all you ever get is 4 of them. Mm-hmm. You don't get any more or any less. There's just 4 shitty ads that replay over and over and over and over.
And then in a few months, it'll be a new batch of 4 or whatever.
And it's fucking annoying. It's terrible. I stopped listening to Pandora because of it.
Well, it's just like if you listen to podcasts, there's a lot of inside jokes about, you've heard so many Blue Chew ads. You've heard so many
get your dick hard.
Yeah. Get your dick healthy or whatever.
Yep.
You hear so many Cash App ads if you listen to Rogan and all these different things.
It's the same ones over and over and over and over and over. But at least with Rogan, this is the reason I have problems with Rogan doing this, is because of that setup. Because Rogan always used to preach, do not interrupt your podcast with ads. Right? He wanted it to be one long, cohesive conversation that wasn't broken up in too many ways. So he's always done ads at the beginning and end. It's between a 5 and 10 minute ad spot at the beginning and a little shorter version at the end. And he's always even said, if you're not interested in listening to my ads, please skip to the part where the fucking conversation begins, right? That's kind of his deal. You can't do any of that if they're required listened ads, right? With Spotify. So he's kind of going against his own thing. Right. And with his press release for that, he said it's still going to be free. It's still going to be available. All you have to do is go download Spotify. Well, it is free, but it's not the same.
It comes at a cost or whatever. And I'm not trying to be, deep or anything.
It does come at a cost. It's not the same product you were getting before.
Sure.
It won't be the same product we're getting right now.
And the spirit of what he kind of emboldens like that, he was such a big fan.
Rebel.
He was such a big fan of the Tom Green setup, because Tom Green was essentially the first human to really to the masses. That dude set up cameras in his
own
house,
servers,
and would have literally anybody call in and would just talk to like random human beings. And like Rogan took a lot of inspiration from that.
Yep.
So, and I think Tom Green's doing that again. Like he's not probably the same setup, and it's probably a lot better production wise. But he's kind of back on that. Back on that whole
he was
thing,
on Rogan recently.
Yeah.
Good conversation. Go listen to it before he switches to Spotify.
But there is. I hate the people that just kind of take the get over it attitude about it, because I mean, there's definitely some things to be said about it. But at the end of the day, we can't change what's happening.
Certainly, no. But we can have opinions on it either way. And he did get a boatload of money, and I don't begrudge too many people for getting boatloads of money. Right? It just of any people to deserve that money, he seems like a genuinely decent human, and he seems like he does good things with his money for other people. And so if you're gonna give someone $100+ million, let it be a decent person, right? Let it be somebody who's also done their own thing for so long. And if you're gonna sell out, you might as well sell out as little as possible for as much money as possible.
Sure.
Right? And that's basically what he's done, right? He's still in charge. They're not big daddying him, right? They're not going to do that, because he clearly would have never agreed to that deal.
Right.
And so
we hope.
Yeah, you would hope. But just the idea that it's still the same product, but now it's just in a different spot specifically. Like I had a problem with UFC having the ESPN exclusive deal to where you have to have ESPN Plus just to order the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
It's not that large of a barrier to entry. If you want all the free events that aren't big pay-per-view cards, you $5 a month is a fucking steal.
My problem with that is that that is a money grab.
Yeah.
Because back then it was just order the pay-per-view.
Yes.
Period.
Whichever ones you wanted. You got to pick and choose the good ones if you wanted to. And so you pay your $70 however many times a year that you want.
Sure.
Right? And you still do that. You can still pick and choose, but you have to, there's a barrier to entry now.
And that to me is like, come on, man. Like,
yep.
Like if Rogan was like, okay, I'm going to Spotify, but you have to pay the premium.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a problem.
We'd be out.
Yeah, it'd be a problem.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is what it is, and like I said, we can't do anything about it. And there's no human that I can think of that wouldn't take that money to go exclusive to Spotify.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Rogan has sworn that he had offers on the board, but it wasn't that kind of exclusive deal. They wanted some sort of control.
Sure.
Right? A controlling interest in his show. And that's what he wasn't willing to give up. So what happened is Spotify wants to, what it looks like happens, obviously I don't know exactly what happened, but YouTube has been a lot more to the grindstone with how they're allowing people to monetize. So if you're even remotely controversial, you can get pulled off of YouTube. Pretty easy.
Oh, yeah.
Not pulled off, but demonetized. That's the dirtiest thing, is they don't pull you off. They still let it stay, but then they won't play. They won't pay you.
My biggest issue with the YouTube setup, man, is there's no clear
definition.
Yeah, there's no clear
guidelines
or anything. When something happens, you go, "Wow, well, it just violated the." What are you talking about? Wait, show me where. They're like, "Well, no, we just decided that it did."
Yeah.
Well, okay.
And so Rogan has been having trouble with that, because he's always kind of in a weird, controversial position, and he takes some weird stances here and there. So he was getting demonetized over and over, and he's always worried about his channel getting ripped. And he's probably made a significant amount of money off of those episodes every time he was releasing one on YouTube, just from the YouTube, not the considering the ads that he gets for the downloads of the podcast itself. But the YouTube watches, a lot of people started watching him once he started doing it on YouTube, right? That's how a lot of people consume their Joe Rogan now. But the thing with that, he was probably making $20,000 an episode on average just from the views. And so, like, if they demonetize him, he's losing a chunk of money every time they do that to one of his episodes.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And so I think he was getting pissed at being censored in some sort of way too. So, like, that's another motivating factor. It's money and censorship, right? And so if he could talk Spotify into not censoring him and not demonetizing, so effectively pay me $120 million or whatever it ended up being, then yeah, okay, I'll go there. And it also helps build Spotify's video platform.
Right. So we did talk about that because I was wondering, is it still going to be video? And apparently Spotify does have a video function.
Just nobody knows about it. And guess what happens when Joe Rogan goes over there? People find out about it.
Sure. But it is a big deal, and I think that I think it can be good. You know, I'm not gonna sit there and just say like, oh, it's terrible that he's doing it, because we don't know yet.
Yeah, I don't know his motivations. We clearly don't know. We can assume a lot, right? Because I've listened to 3,000 hours, give or take, of Joe Rogan probably, and you feel like you kind of know the person after that, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's hard to hide all of yourself completely when you're doing 3,000 hours worth of podcasting.
Well, and he also is pretty open
to begin with.
And he also, every conversation he has with someone is, 2 to 4 hours long.
It's hard to hide yourself in those moments, right? It just is. And that's the reason the show is so successful, is because he allows people to go into the gray area in their conversations, because they're not sound bites. It's not a 15 to 30 minute episode, right? We just get going sometimes at 15 to 30 minutes. And so he allows them to go deep into their gut of what they know and how they feel about things and those sorts of things. So that's the value that his podcast brings to the world, in my opinion, is in-depth conversation and far depth conversation and a wide range of guests, right? So you could tune into just him from now until forever if he continues on the path that he's on, and you'll get anywhere from right wing to left wing. You'll get scientists, you'll get a journalist, you'll get comedians, you'll get psychedelic retards. You know what I mean? You'll get a bunch
fighters.
Of yes. Yep. I mean, it's a huge, broad spectrum of humans
Sure.
that you won't get anywhere else. Entertainers and musicians, and you just don't get Sturgill Simpson and Terrence McKenna on the same podcast too often, right?
Right.
That's just not a thing that happens anywhere else in the world.
And that's super cool. So
yeah, I mean, I believe he's worth, at first I was real pissed off about this. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to download Spotify, because if we're being honest, I listen to podcasts on the Podcast Addict app on my Android device, right?
Same.
And so that's what I know and love. But I've always harped on people, don't be afraid of change, right? If you're stuck in your ways, what the fuck are you doing? Not everything that's new is bad.
Sure.
Right? And different is not always bad either. And so even if it seems like you're not going to like it, at least give it a try. Try it for longer than you're comfortable with, even if you don't like it, to make sure you're getting over that uncomfortable hump of change. And then if you really don't like it down the road, then you don't like it, and you are right to begin with, but you're not always going to be right.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think it is important to just go with it and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm gonna go listen, and I'll probably pay the fucking money to them and get the stupid ad-free version so I can listen to them ad-free, and I'll probably. But the good thing is they have a ton of podcasts on there that they listen to, so I can probably just switch over.
That's what I've been doing. I was going to tell you, I've been moving my podcast over to there. I don't like the interface as much for the podcast, because it doesn't. You can get to everything you need to get to, but the way it's set up is more. I don't know. It's
less intuitive.
Yeah,
probably.
Well, it's not less intuitive. It's just more like, hey, this is better because it looks way cooler and all that. And I like the kind of old school look of Podcast Addict. It kind of looks like Reddit. Yeah, my Reddit app I use, and I don't know, I like it a lot better. But I have been trying to kind of switch over just to test it out, and it's not bad. It's just different.
Yeah,
it's just one of the things. But yeah. So kind of moving on, I actually made a Facebook post and got a lot of mixed kind of comments and feelings about it, and I wanted to open up that here because I want people to know this outright, is that anytime I post something, I rarely take an absolute stance on anything.
Yep.
Rarely.
Because that's a stupid thing to do.
For the most part, it is, yeah. And that is something I do take an absolute stance on because it's something that I've thought about a lot and I've seen a lot in the past. I think it was because of the context of what's going on right now.
Yep.
That kind of.
I think everybody's a little bit on edge right now, too.
Sure.
Right? Like every morning I wake up and you scroll through what we consider our news now in Facebook. You know what I mean? If everybody's being honest, you just, because where's the first time you hear about George Floyd? It's on Facebook, right? Or on your social media app or whatever it might be, whichever your preferred social media app.
And to that point, like, that's a good thing.
Yes.
It's a great thing.
But it's also a bad thing because the world's problems are at your doorstep all the time.
Sure.
They're not even at your doorstep. They're in your home.
But before we get into that necessarily, I want to talk about, so I made a post about doxing, and it is my stance that doxing is never okay.
Yep.
It's never okay. And I got a lot of mixed comments and feelings about it, and I understand.
And that's okay. You're allowed to have other opinions
Yes.
than Justin McCaskill, right? That's a thing that we can do in this world is disagree with people. But I also think sometimes you have to take a hard stance on it, and hopefully you're right, one, and secondly, other people learn from it and you learn from them in the Discord.
Yes.
Right? That's what we're missing in a lot of our communications in society now, is we are all ready to complain out loud in social media, but almost nobody's willing to listen to anyone else. Everybody else is just there to put their 2 cents in and get out, right? Everybody reads the comments curiously, but all you do is judge those comments. You don't actually absorb them.
Sure.
Right? And so if we would listen to other people, even if it sounds like a stupid opinion, listen to it at the very least, absorb it, take a minute to think about it, try and think about it from their perspective, which is a giant deal. Always try and put yourself in someone else's shoes. That's why doxing should never be allowed.
Yep.
Because if you're in that position, you're being intellectually lying to yourself if you think if you were put in the position of that police officer, you would want everyone in the country to know your address and phone number and all of those pertinent information that was released when he was doxed.
Sure.
Right? But that's dangerous.
The thing about it, too, is the emotion behind it I understand, because there's something in me that wanted people to go to his house and pull him out of there and
beat the fuck out of him.
or kill him or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there is that in me.
Absolutely.
I get that. But it's not just about that situation. And it's also, there's so much more involved. And I saw some pretty disheartening comments about this. Was that guy had a wife and kids, right, that lived with him.
And anyone that thinks they're on the side of right now that also said, fuck those people.
Yes.
They're bad people.
Yes. And I saw some people on my timeline say, well, basically to the effect of, I don't remember, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, I'm never going to call anyone out like that. It's not my style. But they basically said, fuck his wife too. And it later came out that his wife released a statement basically saying, I'm out. She's out. Peace. She's divorcing. And obviously was not.
And to be honest, I was talking about that to somebody else the other day. I was like, well, that might just be like we have to separate ourselves. So for our own safety, we're going to separate from him. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but we don't know that. We have to assume their intent is pure.
But my thing is, there's still going to be collateral damage. Now, the thing is, a lot of people, like, no one went into his house and did anything, and that's good. But, that's not that. But I want to make this more broad, and then we'll step into that topic more. But doxing to me it's on many fronts, it's just a terrible idea, because first of all, I've never seen a good outcome from it. And it's happened to a lot of people, and people have died because of it.
Yeah.
People have been killed.
Well, it's illegal.
Yes. People have been killed because of it.
Not to say that everything else that's illegal should be illegal.
Sure. But in this situation, it definitely should be.
I think so. Because
that's not, if we admit that that's the kind of justice we want, then we're not making any progress.
No, we're going backwards. Yes. We're backsliding.
Now, I'm gonna slightly contradict that later when I talk about something else, but in this instance, going to someone's personal home, their domicile,
it's one thing to riot because the other forms of protest haven't worked.
Sure.
It's another thing to completely take the law in your own hands when it comes to an individual.
Yes.
Right? It's okay to, in my opinion, obviously, this is our opinion. In my opinion, it's okay to fight the power. It's not okay to fight an individual. Like direct. It's not okay to attack that individual without the law being on your side. Right?
Sure.
I think is probably my opinion on this, loosely.
Well, and here's the thing, man. I'm a pretty passive person, and I usually am all about nonviolence. I'd say 99% of the time, even. Yeah. But there's definitely a place.
Always a place.
There's definitely a place for violence, and there's definitely a time for it.
And we might be in that place and time.
I think we are. I definitely think we are.
I think they're right to do it. Now, I think there's a lot of shitheads out there doing things that they shouldn't be doing. You know what I mean? Outside of that, they're taking advantage of an opportunity.
Sure.
It's the same thing the government does when there's a giant ordeal and they pass laws that nobody's paying attention to.
Absolutely.
They weren't planning to do that. They're taking advantage of the opportunity.
Right.
That's the same way. So if you see people looting, and that's not what this is about. This isn't a riot to loot things. It's a riot because people are angry and they're pissed off because a system that was supposed to be fixed 60 or 70 years ago never got truly fixed.
Right.
It made a lot of progress, but it did not get fixed, right? And so they're still at a huge disadvantage, I think.
And now the pot's boiling over because I'll say this straight up, and it is what it is, but, white privilege is real.
Oh.
And if you don't think that it is, then you are either delusional or you're 100%
And I will say
lying.
the far left has gone to an extreme on it to some extent, right? Like they blame everything on white privilege sometimes. So I think that's like saying that regret is rape.
Sure.
Right? It's the same thing. It's disheartening to hear that if you regret the sex, it should be considered rape.
Right.
That is not, that's clearly, that's diminishing the people who have actually been raped.
Yes. Takes the teeth out of it.
Yes. So if you say everything is white privilege, then all the white people that are on the fence about it and could be convinced that they are, in fact, benefiting from the privilege of the skin being a certain color, then they're just going to start not paying attention because they're gonna disregard everything else you're saying.
Because then they fall into the damned if you do and damned if you don't category.
And so I think obviously we're two white dudes in lower middle class income brackets, and so we're doing okay in the grand scheme of thing. And I admit all the time that I have a built-in advantage because I'm white.
Of course.
Right? And it's not a giant built-in advantage. I still had a lot of disadvantages. You and I both grew up fairly poor. So us being
really poor, honestly.
Yeah, really, really poor. And so us going from poverty to here is a success in my opinion, right? We're not like uber successful people. We're about to be living together as full-grown men.
Yes.
Right? And so it's in that part of that's a financial convenience, and we love each other as humans and sometimes bros. But and
I'm not going to tell you guys how I'm paying the rent, so don't even ask.
Yeah.
But real quick before we get, and I don't want this to get too echo chambery because I don't like that either.
Yeah.
Straight up, if you've listened to this, Josh and I, we don't talk about a lot of super serious stuff on this podcast. Not to say that we won't. Clearly, we're
because we do it behind the scenes a lot, right?
Clearly
because it's philosophical arguments and good gray area stuff that we can learn where our actual stances are. So if you're not having deep conversations with your friends and disagreeing with each other from time to time, and what that allows you to do is test where your actual ideals are.
Sure.
Right? Because you might think you have an ideal because you relate to this side or this team or that team. But then you go to make that argument and it doesn't stand up to regular conversation, much less real critique, right? And so and that me and Josh disagree about a lot of things, but never to the point of like quarrel. I mean, never to the it's never been like heated because we understand that like there's this mutual idea that we're always trying to be better people. Yeah.
We're always trying to figure something out.
Good intentions.
Absolutely. And now that's not to say that sometimes good intentions can lead you down the wrong road.
That's exactly right.
And man, they have for me a lot.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think I've figured it out along the way. But I do want to say, man, because I've been quiet about a lot because I never want to, ruffle feathers or whatever. But at this point, it's like, it is what it is, man. Like, if you don't think white privilege is real, then you're either delusional or you're being intellectually dishonest because you don't want to admit something about yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to walk around like
you don't have to apologize to every black person that you come across. Right. That's not how this works.
But you need to understand that the biggest thing that's kind of really opened my eyes to this over the last couple of years is, there's little things that happen that you don't even think about, but when it gets pointed out by a person of color and we say, oh, that's not real. Like that's telling somebody who's experienced something that they don't know how to interpret their own experience. And that's bullshit.
That's a dangerous fucking thing to do.
Yeah, it's fucking bullshit. Yeah. And, man, like watching that video of George Floyd being executed.
I've cried over the last 4 days.
Man.
And it's not like boohoo crying, but I've definitely something I've watched and some of it's positive. You know what I mean? Like, to see the love and people come together and do the silent protest and the, you know, where it's blacks and whites and browns and every different color on the spectrum, and they're getting along, and dude, it's harder to watch the violent riots.
Sure.
Right? Because that's real. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the peaceful protests aren't real, but let's be honest, that we're not where we are today without the crazy shit.
Well, the thing
on.
is too, man, like, you know, people that are more focused on the rioting thing, like, man, I get it. Like, it sucks to watch shit get burned down, but like, I might not be right about this, but maybe it's time to burn some shit down. And I mean, you know, it just
you and I were talking about it 2 or 3 days ago when the police station got burned down. Right? Before that, you and I were like, oh, man, this is getting out of hand. This is not okay. They don't need to be, you know, this is starting to... And then they burnt... Because they had already burnt an AutoZone and a Target. And I was like, man, that just seems short-sighted, right? It just seems...
Sure.
Like,
but here's the thing, man. I originally thought that, but I get it.
No,
like,
I understand the anger.
If you get to a point and something boils over, it's damn near impossible
to control that, and
control
especially in a large group.
Yes.
There are real psychological studies that tell you that mob mentality is real, and it will absolutely take over a large group of people. And so if the tenor of the group is anger, then that anger is going to take hold, and it is going to boil over, and something bad is going to come.
In this case, I think that anger is 100% justified.
Absolutely. But I think the burning of the businesses it should be off limits, right? It should be.
I mean, here's the thing, and this is, once again, guys, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just how I feel.
This is us just talking.
But you got to get into that whole thing of like, do the means justify the end? And I mean, if the end is, you know, shit starts to get better for people of color in the United States, then fucking
do it.
Burn down an AutoZone. You know, like I know that sucks to hear from a lot of people. It just is what it is at this point, man.
And I would prefer, but the moment I got 100% on board is when they did the police station, which would be counterintuitive to some people. They're like, oh boy, they did that. No, that's the embodiment of the man that killed the other man, right? That's the place where he goes. That's his reprieve. That's where, you know, and I know he doesn't work there anymore, but it's a symbol, right? There's and
I don't know the timeline specifically. I should have looked at it right before we did this. I think that I don't know that the arrest happened before that.
It happened after.
And so now I don't know that made it happen, but by God, like here's the thing, man. He was not in jail for 5 days?
And that's unheard of, because if that's a black man that does that to a white person,
might get killed on sight.
Yeah.
First of all,
but
they're definitely not going to get to hang out at home for 5 days.
Yeah. I mean, it seems crazy to me. And the other thing to where we're apologizing for police all the time. Listen, they've got an impossible job. Impossible fucking job. I won't say that fuck all police, right? That's just not, because I don't say fuck all of anything ever. It's not something, but in general terms, it's a bad fraternity.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's gotten out of hand, and unfortunately, there are a lot of bad apples. And there's a lot of undercurrent racism in the precincts across this country. And the problem is all you do is breed it over and over and over again.
Sure.
Right? And it's not because racism is slowly going to disappear, hopefully, as more children become born and they realize how ridiculous their parents' thoughts were. And so that systemic racism that goes from parent to child to parent to child to parent over and over and over again, because racism is clearly a taught thing, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There are preferences. You know, you might be more attracted to a white woman than a black woman. That's not the same thing as racism.
Right.
Right? That's you not being as attracted to black women as you are white women is not racism. That's preference. Right? The difference is not liking someone or having a clear assumption of someone because of their color of their skin.
Sure.
Right? And that's where things get bad. You know, in we live in the South. It's worse here than it is in some other places. But it's not this isn't Minneapolis isn't in the South, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you know, the thing I was about to say that is I'm not saying that it's not worse here. But every time I see a major event, you know, it could just be that we don't have as many big cities.
That's part of the problem
down here, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's always a Baltimore or a Minneapolis or
inner cities.
What's weird to me is even like places that are known as progressive places, like L.A.
Yep, the L.A. riots.
Yeah, I mean, like what?
That's where most of this happens because let's be honest, your urban areas, your large city centers are generally liberal.
Right.
They tend to be blue. And so but this is bigger than blue and red, and I hate to see it turn into a blue and red thing because everything does now. There's not anything that doesn't turn into a blue or red thing.
Well,
natural disasters turn into blue or red things. It's fucking weird, dude.
Weird. Yeah.
We've got to get away from that, right?
They made a pandemic a fucking political thing.
Even the invisible killers, the pretend invisible killers that we can't see that are supposed to unite all of us, right? The old, what's the president that quoted that said, if aliens came down, at least we would all get together, right? At least we would all band together to kill.
I think that was an Independence Day.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I think it was actually Reagan that said it.
Probably. Jesus.
And, but I mean, it's a good concept, right? If aliens came out of the sky and were going to try and kill us, it wouldn't be like us and China. It'd be all of us, right? It would be us as a species, as the world effectively would all band together and try and kill the fucking aliens.
You just wonder how long that would last or whatever after the fact. But another sentiment I'm really tired of is, especially in cases that are so clear cut like George Floyd, is what did he do? Well, I'll tell you this: in the video, he was completely restrained with his hands behind his back, handcuffed. So
and
anything past that. I don't give a shit.
It doesn't matter. You could be resisting arrest all he wants. He's in handcuffs. He's controlled, ladies and gentlemen. They have control of that man. There's no need, and technically, that's a legal maneuver that the guy used in Minnesota. In their state, in that city specifically, they're allowed to do that, right? Because we've got some jiu-jitsu knowledge here or there. In jiu-jitsu, they teach you where the head goes, the body goes. So if you can control the neck and head area, the body stays down, right? And so it's harder for them to get up if you use that technique. I don't think anyone intended for you to use it for 8 or 9 minutes.
No.
Right? Because if that would have only happened for 30 seconds until they apprehended that guy.
Well, and you can't. So I didn't see the full video of like the full arrest or whatever. But I mean, I don't imagine he was in that position when he handcuffed him, right?
You would hope that that's the only reason he was in that position.
Well, I'm saying unless another officer.
Well, there were 2 other officers on it.
And why aren't they at this point? I mean, they need to be arrested.
Well,
it just is what it is, man.
If you're committing a felony and a murder happens, even if you did not commit the murder, you go to jail for murder.
Yes.
They committed a felony and a murder happened. No, we can argue about degree of murder all you want to. I honestly don't think he did it on purpose. I think he had malicious intent with being violent towards the man, right? I don't think his intent was to kill him.
But at the end of the day, when a guy says I can't breathe and you have him restrained, man.
Well, I'll be devil's advocate here. Listen, I'm on Floyd's side, right? So anybody listening that hears me, I love to take devil's advocate's side here in almost any situation because I like to hear both sides of the story, right? And I don't think there's another side of the story, honestly, but I think this is what you're going to hear from other people. Anyone being apprehended is going to claim they can't breathe. Well, a lot of guys probably say, I can't breathe, please get off me, that sort of thing, right? So you can't I don't think that's the expectation. I think he should have known you can't do that for 8 or 9 minutes to a human being in general. Right, it's inappropriate on every level. Even if he was unruly to a point where that technique was required, right, to completely pin him down. He had 2 other officers on the legs and ass of this dude in that moment, and the guy's already handcuffed. You're over the line, far over the line, and then to expect that fraternity to protect you, there's an expectation that the fraternity is going to protect you, and we've got to talk about stop talking about how this man was wronged and talk about how that is a problem. That's the underlying problem, right? Because there's no accountability. There's little to no accountability in the police state that we run.
There's none.
There's just none.
And here's the thing, man. And I've got friends that are police officers or at least acquaintances. And if you hear this, I'm sorry, not sorry. If you're a police officer in the United States, you are above the law.
100%.
Now,
how many tickets do they get?
No, exactly.
None. How many times? Listen, the dirty, dirty secret about police is the domestic abuse is rampant. They almost never go to prison for that. Right? They get in trouble for it a lot, but they almost never go to jail for it. Why? Because they're above the law. They aren't following the same laws that they're enforcing.
Right.
That's a double standard, and it should not even be that way. It should be the other way. They should be held to a higher standard than every other citizen in their area, every other community member in their area, because they're swearing an oath. They're swearing an oath, and then they're breaking that oath by not only breaking the law, not arresting them fucking selves when they break the law.
Yep.
Right? They're double fucking themselves on their oath.
Now, also, at this point, a guy did this, went home for 5 to 6 days or whatever it was, and it took burning down a fucking police station to get him arrested. Now I'm sorry.
That's strength in fraternity.
Yep.
That's all that amounts to. That man did a terrible thing that any other citizen in the country that we live in would have been arrested already. Now, you can argue the charge, you can argue all the minutia all you want to, but they definitely would have been in handcuffs that fucking day.
Yeah. And here's the thing, man. At the end of the day, you know, it's easy to say, especially as a civilian, man, I would have done something if I was there. I mean,
it's hard to know that.
It's hard to know that.
I saw Becky on Facebook saying, well, I would have tackled them. And you're like, you're full of shit, one, because there were a lot of citizens around. There were a lot of civilians around, and nobody stopped it.
Sure.
Not one human being stopped it, including the fucking pudgy-ass cop that was just walking around trying to protect the dude from a camera angle.
Yep.
Right? That's all that is.
And you had EMT, EMS on the scene. I mean, it was just, and I don't know, man. It's
frustrating on every level. But we have to get past, we have to remember his name. I think I'm bad at this because I don't like absorbing a lot of news because it is hard to absorb and it's depressing. And a lot of people will say that I've sat back too long and I didn't do anything, right? And you're right at the end of the day. I didn't do enough to help. I don't know what I could have done, but I definitely didn't do anything.
Sure.
Right? And so that I didn't do enough. I don't even know that I'm going to do anything now other than this podcast and hope that other people listen to it and hear our opinions on this and absorb that and at least make them think. Right? Think before they do a racist thing or think before.
Or be aware of it, of what that thing is.
Be aware that if you're a white person and you see a black, they're having a tougher time at life most of the time.
Yes.
By default. And that sucks on every level, right? To think about that makes me want to cry. As a grown fucking man, makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate where we are. And that doesn't say that we don't also live in a wonderful place. There is opportunity here for black people that there was not a long time ago, right? There are successful, really, really successful black people, but we can't just point to them and say, well, they did it. Why can't you? Right? Because that's a bad argument, right? White people in general have a basis of land ownership in this country for a very long time. Black people had none. Even when they released them as slaves, very few of them got anything after that.
Sure.
So there's a built-in disadvantage financially over the last 150 years that we haven't made up for. And I'm not even a reparations guy, but we have to figure something out to help them.
Yes. And I can say this as someone who grew up poor, and, you know, I knew a lot of, you know, people of color in school that also grew up poor that I connected with at a very early age. And to me, the reason that I used to not understand the whole white privilege thing is because to me, it was always financial privilege, right? Because I experienced that a lot growing up, but now as an adult that can look at things, and through a different lens, I don't have any data on this, so I'm sure if someone hears this and they don't agree, where's the proof? I don't have any just written proof of this, but I'd be willing to bet you dollars to donuts that a poor white person coming up versus a poor black person coming up, the white person still has the advantage.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying that they live a great life, right? But I guarantee you it's better than...
Yeah, let a white person be a manager interviewing for jobs, and let Susan walk in, and let Shaniqua walk in. And unless Shaniqua's far superior to Susan's getting hired more often than not. I would almost guarantee you that's how that works. right? Because there's built-in bias, and we're guilty of it too. I'm not immune to this.
Sure.
Right? I have the same biases built into me, unfortunately. And it's hard to deprogram that because, listen, I had racist family members.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah, I've heard the N-word dropped casually at family functions my whole life. Right? Like, and at a young age, you feel like you can't speak up about it. And when I got older, I started to speak up about it. Like, hey, man, you can't do.
I made Christmas awkward about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. When my uncle decided to go on a little tirade, and he was trying to mask it as something else, but he was definitely being racist as fuck. And I just let him know. I was like, dude, shut the fuck up. And he was like, he kind of looked at me. My mom looked at me, and it was the whole thing. But I was like, I'm not gonna concede here.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can either be mad or we can move on. Or, if I need to leave.
To say racism is dead or that they have equal opportunity or that's a false premise. Like you haven't looked into it enough clearly, right?
Or you're afraid of what you'll find. You know what I mean? Like you did look into it and you didn't like it.
Yeah.
You didn't like the outcome because then it made you realize that like.
It's the same thing as women getting paid less. Mm-hmm. That's a real fucking thing. It's not as I don't think it's as big a gap as the government claims, or you know what I mean, or especially the left claims. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
It's clearly there, and it clearly needs to be fixed. If they're not getting paid roughly the same as their counterparts that are male, what are we doing? Why are they not? Right. And it's the same thing here. Right. When they say systemic, institutionalized racism, most people don't understand what that means, right? They just think that it's like a conspiracy theory in the government to keep people down.
Sure.
Well, of course it is, because that's what the government does.
But I think at this point, though, some of it's not even like conscious. Even.
No.
It's like it's just ingrained.
Absolutely.
In the
that's
system,
the stuff that's in all of us that we can't get rid of, that then white people are more likely to get elected than black people, so they keep making the rules. So... I used to be against affirmative action because it seemed unfair to me. As a white person, it seemed unfair to me. I was like, what the fuck do you mean they have a lower threshold to get in? I can do better than them and still get passed up for the same thing they do. I don't have an issue with affirmative action anymore, right? As a full-grown person who has looked into all of it, well, they are at a disadvantage from the time they were born with more melanin. That's a problem, right? And I don't feel sorry for them. I just want it to change.
Sure.
Right? You don't want people to be at a disadvantage just because they were born with certain skin color. And then the next thing, if we could ever fix this, then you got to fix if you're born in Mexico, you don't get any opportunities either.
Sure.
Right? Because that's a much larger issue to fix, I think. And that's saying something, considering how bad it is, how hard it is to fix a racist issue, right?
Right.
Because being racist is who you are as a person.
Yep. That's
it. And all of us are, to some minor extent at the very least. And if you're a white person and you don't think, this is going to be a real controversial thing. If you're a black person and you don't think you don't have a bias towards white people, it's an understandable fucking bias. Why wouldn't you?
Yep.
If you've looked around your whole life and we've had advantages you didn't have, and the police are pulling you over at a higher clip than they're pulling us over, even though you're 12% of the population and we're fucking 70 of it, right? That disparity is gross.
Yep.
But we also all have to admit that we all have biases. The difference is our biases are damaging to them, and their biases just prevent us from coming together as easily, right? That's the problem.
Yep.
And I don't blame them for their bias. I blame us for our bias because ours is grosser than theirs.
It's true. Yeah. So it got a little serious here, and that's good, I think. And remember, guys, like, if ever you hear anything from me, I can only speak for myself, that sounds like I'm being hateful or anything like that. It's not meant that way. And if you can, in a constructive way, point it out to me and tell me how I can be a better ally, then I am all ears, because, like I said, something has to change. I've been very upset, and I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for anything like that, because what I'm feeling pales in comparison to what people of color go through every day in this country, and especially with what's happening right now. but I do want to be better. Just plain and simple. I just want to be better.
Yeah.
So, I'm open. If you guys want to hit us up on the social media, please do. Please interact. We'll never attack anyone.
No.
We'll never.
And we ask you, if you do comment in our areas of social media, be gentle to each other.
Yes.
Understanding.
That doesn't mean tolerating someone being hateful either. But I'll also take care of that myself if I see that in the comments and things. But yeah, hit us up on Facebook, the McRADcast. Hit us up on Twitter, and check us out on YouTube. We are going to try. I'll be moving this next couple weeks, but we are going to eventually try to have video. I mean, that's our goal.
Yeah.
Just so you guys can maybe get to know us a little bit better. And I know watching a podcast for me is preferable, even though most of them I listen to because I'll be in the car or at work with my headphones on or something like that. But just send us a comment, send us any feedback. We will definitely read it, and we appreciate all of it. I mean, there's never a time. I've gotten a lot of oh my God, excuse me. I got a lot of support, a lot of messages about people enjoying the podcast. But if you've been silent because you for whatever reason, or what, maybe you're not even listening. But if you are and you want to talk to us, please do, because we appreciate it. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to quote the great Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan, and just say, be excellent to each other. And always remember, guys, to stay rad.